Hello, Vlasta. I am hesitating whether to introduce something that I already know about you or to let you introduce yourself. What is your preference?
I can introduce myself.
Please do that.
My name is Vlasta Sikimic. I come the same as Maria from Serbia, and I also work at the same institution as Maria at the Eindhoven University of Technology. But my background is in philosophy of science and philosophy of technology.
Yeah, and I find it extremely interesting at the technical university where we are. Usually, I was used to be surrounded by people who are talking about technical things and not people who studied philosophy and psychology and people who are dealing with ethics at the department where you are at.
This is something which we learned that is of crucial importance because technology can either guide us or we should guide the technology and use it. And in order to take control of technology and to put the normative requirements on technology, we actually need this reflection and not just production and consumption. And reflection comes from the disciplines that you have listed. So philosophy gives us the normative framework, and psychology can tell us if we have from the one aspect a lot of studies how to maximize the profit from technology or advertisement coming from technology, the adjusted ads and such contents, then psychology tells us, okay, but how do you defend from that? How do you preserve your knowledge, well-being in this digital era?
Hmm.
And philosophy tells you should preserve it. It goes hand in hand. So descriptive sciences tell you what is possible and how something works, what is the case. And normative discipline, such as philosophy, tells you what should be the case based on also what is in reality, or maybe what in the ideal case, where we might not be there yet, but what should ideally be the case. So that goes hand in hand. If you have theory that's not informed by data, then your theory is not very informative, it's empty. But if you just rely on the data and don't have any theory behind, then you are losing these decisions which are crucial for human freedom, human choices, human thinking and existence.
Hmm. Interesting. And I have to say, like, the first thing that comes to mind is that usually technology, like, first we work on developing the technology and then we think about how we're going to use it and or like, should we use it like this or like that? So, what is your perspective on that?
I think that really depends. In some cases, for example, COVID-19 pandemic, we had a goal of creating cures, vaccines, and we worked towards that end. So sometimes we have a very specific problem that we are trying to solve. Sometimes we are doing something more exploratory in our research. This research can even be more practical, but we are still exploring the possibilities. And very often, certain solutions were designed with one idea in mind and then are used for something completely different. So that can all happen. But being aware that some research is unethical or some guiding ideas behind a technology are unethical from the get-go is a problem.
Mm,
And we want our students to be informed about this before they start working.
yeah. So tell me, how do you do that? How do you inform students? What is their role then afterwards?
Their role is to be a responsible innovator, for instance, or also a democratic citizen, so a responsible citizen, and a good human being. One can define the purpose of life of being a good human being. So all these questions come together, and we have different courses and strategies that we are teaching students. Some are some are more focused on this ethics of technology, but others are focused on the decision making regarding technology. This means exactly the questions you asked. To what should be developed? What is the benefit of a certain technology? What is the drawback? How should we reason if there is uncertainty in the implementation of the system? We also are very focused on the use of AI, informing everyone the limits and the benefits of AI, the dangers of AI, how to use it responsibly, how to use it in a trustworthy manner, and we are also interested in some type of digital critical thinking, extending these abilities in the current moment in this AI era. The second point, more related to my discipline, philosophy of science, in stricto sense, is what I mentioned to Maria before we started recording, is that we also discuss scientific integrity with all PhD candidates, and that we try to understand how can scientists improve, how can they do responsible science, what is responsible science, but also how their work conditions can improve, because when humans are doing something, they cannot be treated just as a commodity. And if we treat them with respect, that will also result in their higher job satisfaction, but also in better scientific results. So we as a society will have more benefits knowledge-wise from people who are not necessarily incentivized just to massively produce results, to focus only on the positive results, who are maybe incentivized to spend time and money in suboptimal ways. And that's something to think about. And in the end, in the bottom line, it's not even everything about production. Always these values in the background play a role.
Yeah. And when you say researchers should not be treated as commodity, does it mean that you also, in a way, are teaching people who are dealing with researchers how not to treat them as commodity, or how to give them optimal or different working conditions?
That is more coming from my research lines, so from my publications, or from some workshops that we recently had where this was discussed. This is also, I'm also frequently invited to conferences to talk about these questions. It is not easy to impose to someone who doesn't want to listen certain aspects, but yes, that's definitely part of it. And some part of research, for instance, says how much time needs to be dedicated to supervision, that one supervisor, depending, of course, in a field, we did some tests in biology, experimental biology, that there it made sense that one supervisor has 5 PhD students maximally, because otherwise this person will not have enough time for them. If you want to have a bigger lab, then you need more postdocs or junior professors, or whatever you call them, to help in this supervision, in setting up everything. We also investigated these types of elitism in science, and that is one big danger for our global knowledge. And that's that in some areas and in some, so first of all, some universities, some countries, global north versus global south, even though whenever I say this name, there is some potential of an implicit bias, so we are not thrilled by the name itself. But there already we see that researchers from certain parts are more privileged than others, and are even more trusted than others, which is absolutely not justified. They have more resources, the topics of their interest are more funded, and that you can hear when you do interviews with scientists that they are unhappy. They would like to explore some diseases that are really important for South America, but it's very hard for them to find funding for such research, even though it's of crucial importance. This is a specific example that actually I heard from biologists. And you are seeing this type of injustice and this elitist bias there. And then we also have it even within disciplines, that social sciences would often be less valued than natural sciences, which is again unjustified. So all these questions are what we are trying to understand, because the goal of our research is how can we maximize the knowledge on the level of the whole community, and the whole community profits from diversity, from diverse perspectives, and from diverse knowledge, and it's also more trustworthy. People trust more when they get knowledge from the sources that are closer to them, instead of having some imperialistic system of science.
Yeah. And I can see that at our university as well, when you say like certain departments, they have more money than others. So I wonder, you say that you are trying to understand these things, but is there also a way that there is an implementation as well?
Yes, the implementation comes from the science funding and science policies. There, I must say that I am very happy with the system in which I currently am. It's much better than some other systems where I previously was. Because it really combines, gives some job security on the one hand. On the other, it also really gives decent salaries to PhD students, while in some other countries, PhD students would only get, in humanities especially, like 65% salaries and things like that. So I am, there I would say, and also what I like about the system where we are now, it's very open for discussion and understands the importance of inclusion. But if you would think about our home country, there the inclusion would be a big problem, because the foreigners don't really have a lot of opportunities to come to that system and do science. Of course, it's now opening and it's going in the right direction, but it's not that easy. And there you see, okay, there is this great idea of job stability, but then some people are not motivated enough. And then you have, my former colleagues telling me, if we publish in an international or in a local journal, we get the same reward, the same number of points. Well, that's a problem. That's, of course, not in every discipline. That's specific for my discipline and so forth. But you see a lot of tension there. So you want, on the one hand, to stimulate excellence, in a sense. So to stimulate, to motivate people, to reward them for their hard work. On the other hand, you don't want to burn them. And you don't want to make this system, which is now being criticized and discussed, where science is observed in a very commercialized way, that people need to bring external money in order to fund their institution, and it doesn't matter which quality comes out of it, but that it's becoming some type of a sport in which the only purpose is to get money and to get it through a system in which maybe you give proposals which are innovative but not too innovative, that are just right to be funded, and such things are highly problematic. And then as solutions, what you said, the solutions come from a system, so giving some security in the job, and then everybody has job security, then you can have these so-called competitions for extra money, but that shouldn't be the necessity. And then in these competitions, also having some fair rules and funding exploratory research, being open to negative results, saying that also the studies that end up with negative results have the value. This is this idea of pre-registering the studies. So valuing such efforts is very important. And when we talk about the early career researchers, also they are giving them a chance that if their experiment didn't work, it doesn't matter. They should still be rewarded for their hard work if they worked hard.
Yeah. Well, I can identify with that because my PhD was in electrical engineering, and there you do a lot of experiments which are going to fail for sure. So you are going down the route that is unknown, and you are trying to figure out what is the recipe that works. So you are going to end up with a lot of recipes that don't work, but you are probably going to put them in your thesis, not even all of them, and they are going to serve as some kind of manual for the person that comes after you. But unfortunately, then they are not cherished for wider scientific community to say, like, look, I have tried all of these things. These recipes don't work under these conditions, etc., etc. so that you will also save the time for other researchers who are doing exactly the same thing in another country, in another institution, but under similar conditions. So yeah, I fully support this, like sharing things that do not work.
Yes, and who will be cited now also starts to depend a little bit on the marketing skills. In my discipline, you don't have such an issue with not having results because, you know, the famous joke, what do you need to do mathematics? Well, you need a paper, pencil, and a eraser. And what do you need for philosophy? You just need even less. You just need a paper and a pencil. And we have this. So in this context, okay, maybe that's easier to have something publishable, but one has to be satisfied, of course, with the level of idea and with the quality. But then a lot is about advertising your work, whether someone will really cite you, because this is a very small field. In other fields, I'm not sure about your field. I know in biology, people are very scared that someone might even steal their idea before they publish. So they don't want to share the original thoughts at conferences, but only something that's already published. You're nodding.
Yes, yeah, it's exactly that case. And even furthermore, in electrical engineering, because it's very close to application, you are even thinking about patents. So you do not even want to make a publication because you are thinking about a patent. So if something ends up in a publication, then you cannot patent it anymore. So it's even one step beyond that, that you are thinking, okay, what didn't work, what did work and could end up in a publication, what worked so well to be a patent, and how to like distinguish these two.
And when you patent something that the group of researchers did, who is then the owner? The head of the group, like PI, principal investigator, or the PhD student, or all of them, or how does it work?
Multiple people. Usually it's multiple people. I very rarely see the cases that it's one person. So it's all of the people who were involved in the process of getting this specific result and coming to this specific patent.
Okay,
and then you have and then you can have a lead inventor and co-inventors. So it can be like one or multiple lead inventors and one or multiple co-inventors.
And is that bringing some profit, or this is just to have credits for your work?
Yeah, that's interesting. As a university, it gives you like a one-off payment, which is, I would say, ridiculous. If you would use it to make a business out of it, it can bring you much more than that. So what happens nowadays, especially in my department, is that a lot of professors, they co-found something. So when they have patents, and you can say that this is also maybe a trend nowadays in the Netherlands or maybe in Europe, that we want to also have more of this spin-off and startup culture and foster people to go down this route. So now we have professors who are working 4 days a week as an associate professor usually, and then 1 day a week they work in the startup that they have co-founded with other people there. Could be a PhD that is then going to become one of the C-level people in that company, and something.
So it's leading to the entrepreneurial route.
It is, yeah. Well, I'm very close to that, and in your field it's very different. But for us, we are very close to applications, so then let's say easily it can go down this route.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. Sorry, you want to say something?
Oh, please.
I'm curious because you are working as an assistant professor. What do you see, so now in this relationship with the people that you work with, so with PhD students, maybe with other types of students, what do you see as your role and what do you see as their role? And what is it that you are trying to teach them or transfer to them?
That is a very loaded question.
It is.
From the beginning, when I was a PhD student, I had one perspective. When I became an assistant professor, then I realized, okay, this is also not easy from the other side. And there are a lot of challenges, especially when you're a young woman in science coming from Eastern Europe, to have enough authority, respect, to set boundaries. It can be challenging, so it's not as trivial as one might think. Yeah, what is very nice is to always try to think of being in the shoes of the other person and what this other person might need or expect, and also maybe openly ask to understand it. I do think that there are different versions and modules in which someone is doing their PhD. There are people who are like self-funded or externally funded. The expectations from them are for sure different.
Mm-hmm.
The expectations, in my opinion, of course, from someone who is fully funded to do a certain task and project are higher, or again, in accordance to that, different. And then you have people who are also working in industry and are doing this combined type of PhD, where one again has to navigate and communicate with different stakeholders. How should this path develop? What I think is very important is that people are rewarded decently for their work, both financially and with respect to appreciation for what they're doing, because sometimes appreciation is what is missing. Often it's not even anything material, but just
Mm-hmm.
being nice to someone and motivating someone. I do see myself as someone who needs to motivate people. That is part of my job. And I do see that it is required for me to spend time with uh, yeah with students, to dedicate my time with them. It is very nice when but it is a two-way street, right? So it is very nice when you receive positive feedback from them and then you can interact. It is of course always very challenging when this doesn't happen. In the Netherlands, we always have the supervisory teams, which
Mm.
again something nice, because then people are not dependent on just one person, so they can turn to other people, and someone might interact better. These are very individual things, but the more professional and the more someone is trained, I think the better, and then it doesn't really matter with whom you are working. And the experience is from what one could hear from what some people had during their PhDs, can really be highly problematic, in a sense that some people were really dependent on only one supervisor, that they didn't have opportunities to change, that all the funding for the experiments came from one person, that there were barriers. Then we always have to keep in mind, if someone is coming from abroad, maybe this person also has negative motivation, like running away from something, and not necessarily a positive motivation for the PhD. I do think that there is, a limit on what a supervisor can and should do, and the other thing comes from the person themselves, whether one wants to do this or not. And I don't think that there is this we see in our society, that now everybody wants to have a PhD, and that's considered really important. And we are measuring our value with that. And I think that's very wrong, and it's a toxic type of thinking. Also, this elitist type of thinking. People should focus on what is best suited for their interests, and go for that. And if they want to do science, then they should do it for the right reasons. So really care for science. And what is sad is if someone is ready to break some ethical codes just to get some result, some recognition in science, then we are missing the point of what we are doing in the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe you will disagree with this, but I do see a lot of people who are using the scientific method even outside of academia. And maybe, they are not recognized as being scientists or being researchers, but they are doing exactly the same thing, just in a different framework. And how I see PhD, it's really like a framework that can teach you to use the scientific method And if this is something that you want to do, perfect. Like this framework can give you that. But it's not the only one. You could also do it in another setting, in another framework, somewhere by yourself or somewhere in a company. There can be different ways how people can learn these things.
And it's very healthy to keep options and to see what can be very dangerous if when someone sees the self-worth only in one outcome. And keeping in mind that there are different options, that we can always take different paths, that is very healthy. And there, I remember one brilliant young person who is now a professor was very worried about his future and was telling me, what if this fails? What should I do? Will I start working in McDonald's? And then I was saying, well, look, you are so smart, so educated, have such a great work ethics. If this doesn't work, something else great will work in industry, in policy, in arts, in literally critique realm. There's so many things that humanities scholars can do. And then removing this pressure from ourselves and also valuing ourselves for what we are and what we invest in our because spending so many hours on research is investing in our knowledge, and we have to appreciate this about ourselves. So I think that's something very important. And what Snoop Dogg says, thank yourself for hard work, for not sleeping, for working, whatever we are doing, right? And then after doing that, also kind of maybe reconsidering the paradigm of science that pushes us to work overtime and just say, okay, maybe we should be this change that we want to see, and be more careful with what we are doing there. And not schedule the meetings. That's something that I really try to do, not schedule the meetings in the late evening, to really try to stick to some work hours, to try to discipline myself with responding to emails, to send as little possible emails. I also teach my students not to do that too much because it's becoming very hard for us in this digitalized society to process all that, and we have to be careful to respect our well-being. First of all, to be aware of it, and then to put some boundaries and be careful in this sense. And then we are hopefully creating some nicer paradigm for science, so for ourselves and for people around us.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting one when you say that you are trying to do that yourself and teach the students to do the same. I also have an example of a person who was at the managing position, and this person was used to sending emails at any time of the day and night, and then would realize that people would respond on a Saturday evening. But this person did not expect this. But just because of the fact that it came from somebody who has a manager in their title or somebody who is higher up, then there was immediately this expectation that was created. Oh, if this person is sending me on a Saturday evening, it means that it's important and I need to respond. And then, when the manager became aware of this, then there was a talk also with the employees to realize, okay, it doesn't have to be like that. So it's interesting, like how some things that we don't consider that other person have to do, but they implicitly put some pressure on us that we have to perform in a certain way.
Yes, it's a cultural method. These are these implicit rules of academia. And these implicit rules of academia can be very toxic. If people start having this culture of coming sick to work, that can be highly problematic. If people have some culture which is not looking positively to parents to caregivers, not only parents, you can be a caregiver also to your parents, grandparents, and so forth. So if you're not leaving the space for that, that can be also very toxic, and that can happen if we are on a project with limited time. That's something in the interviews that I did with scientists also came up as a topic, that there was nobody could ever explicitly say you're not allowed to take to take maternity leave, but it was implicit that the project would really suffer if this would happen. And those things are highly problematic, and hopefully will be changing in the future. They have to also change from the top. But some things, yes, we can control our behavior, and then we can control how we talk to other people, but also the sending emails. I struggle with it myself. I send way too many emails in not appropriate times. Actually, sorry, no, I don't send too many emails. That I managed to control, but I do still send them in times when I shouldn't be doing it. I try also to reduce that, and I will achieve it, of course. But it is tempting. It is not so easy, but it's also not only a problem towards the other person. One should think, okay, but do I respect myself and my own time and my own well-being when I'm working on Sunday evening and sending emails? Of course, sometimes there is really some deadline, so that justifies it. That also happens in industry. It's just that we are noticing in industry people put a little bit more emphasis, of course not in every industry, but in some, in good examples, more emphasis on really creating good culture and defining what this good culture is.
Mhm.
And if someone is sending an email out of work time, then they at least say put a disclaimer that other people are not expected to respond, or they just don't do this. And that's just one of many examples where having better culture and thinking about the culture is helpful. And also often we will realize if something is triggering for us individually, it is also triggering for 80% of the people around us. And just nobody just wants to say the king is naked. But when one person says it, then you realize, okay, you're not alone. Other people think the same. Other people feel the same. They're also under pressure. They also have an imposter syndrome. They also struggle sometimes. They also cry sometimes. That's all happening around us. It shouldn't, but then you can get some support and an understanding. So showing some vulnerability also makes us humans, and it's very important there. For PhD students, yes, showing some vulnerability makes a lot of sense. Showing some emotions makes a lot of sense, but also being able to regulate your emotions is very important in high stress environments, and this is a high stress work environment. And that's something that's not being taught enough, in my opinion. And that would be something telling us, okay, I might now think that, I don't know, this project is failing, that this is not working out, but that's not necessarily objective. I am just tired. That's not necessarily how my supervisor thinks about it. I'm not alone in this. There are other people who can help me. Feelings are not facts. And being able to say, okay, I will not now just go into this negative thinking. Maybe I will take a break and then return to my problem. Or I received a very negative review, but then it's not about me. This reviewer maybe had a really bad day. In some disciplines, in my discipline, reviews can be very harsh, and there is not a good culture in how to communicate with someone. If this is a junior researcher, they can get frustrated very easily from that, but then you just say, no, this is not about me. I do feel frustrated, but it's very important that I build the resilience, because I want to finish this, and it's water over duck's back. It just goes over, and it shouldn't touch me too much. So those are some things to consider. And then there are these cultural elements, and our culture, I mean Serbian culture, is a rather aggressive one, and that's also not very helpful. And when you go to this international setup, that's not considered something positive. And on the other hand, we at least express our emotions, so we don't get so sick as some other people get sick by just suppressing their emotions. But so there is this line, golden middle between over-expressing and just burying everything inside and not being able to deal with it properly. And in both cases, we need some mechanisms of emotional regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, like PhD is a highly stressed environment. Also, yeah, because we perceive it as, this project is our identity. So it is who we are, it defines us. It's not like a project that I'm working on, but it is who I am. I am the researcher and who happens to be working on this project. And yeah, oftentimes there is no sharing that there are difficult times, even with the supervisor or with peers. On the outside, it might seem that other people are going through better times, but we have no idea what's going on inside of the person, or something that might be super stressful for one person is not the case for another person. Or um, for example, this communication between the supervisor and the student, when you said that your role is to motivate the PhD student, I fully support that, because there are going to be times when you are not going to believe in this project anymore. You are not going to believe that you can make it. You are not, like, just everything is going to drop down, and it's normal. It's a period of time. But if there is a supervisor that can challenge that and can give you a spark, so there is another person that believes that you can make it, this can help tremendously. But if there is an absence of this person, if the supervisor is not like that and is making it even more difficult, then this can be, for some people, it can be a deal breaker, maybe to stop the PhD, or maybe they go into burnout, or some scenarios that we don't want to have.
I just want to say, someone stopping the PhD is not equally bad. It's not a bad scenario at all. It's a personal decision. It's bad for the project, but for the person, it's fine. If you think it's fine, then it's fine for you. Having a burnout, that is a problem. And that is a problem for everyone. And that shouldn't happen. And the system has to prevent that. And it's also not always about motivating. If someone is already very motivated, then it's often in science, the role of a manager is to say to the person maybe to slow down and that it's all fine, and to reassure people who are working too hard, or who are too stressed, or who are too motivated, too eager. So there is also that, and it has to be somehow that's why it's a personalized relationship. That has all these layers. And what you said about our identity, and that is, in my opinion, another very important philosophical debate, that we often perceive not only PhD, but any scientific role, we perceive it as our vocation and not just as a job. And it's not our vocation, it is our job. And that's not easy to understand sometimes, because there is, again, this mystification, glorification of this elitist role that comes with these superpowers and super responsibilities. And that is something that's toxic. And we, again, in this other context, that in the more left-wing context, in Serbian language, we would not say refer to researchers in these terms of vocation. We would often say scientific worker, which was meant, and the term was placed there to say that all workers are kind of equal. That these workers are not superior to the other workers, so non-scientific staff working at the same institution. Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And it's a much healthier approach to the situation.
Absolutely. For example, what you mentioned about the professor who said, "Oh, am I now supposed to be working in McDonald's?" I don't see a problem working in McDonald's. Like, I also bet that there are skills at McDonald's that scientific workers are not able to, perform, or like the interaction with customers, or making the customer happy, etc., etc.
I mean, for him, this was his experience as a student, that he had to have this side job, and it was like a nightmare. It was a very rough job for him that he did not like at all. And because philosophy is not very profitable, he was not seeing other possibilities. I mean, of course, he was seeing it. It's just getting emotionally overwhelming. And then we talked
Mhm.
about it, and then you realize, okay, even with a discipline, which is not electric engineering that you can just apply everywhere, and it's in high demand, even with humanities, you can do something meaningful that satisfies you. So I understand that some people might be satisfied with different type of jobs, but for him, this example meant he's referred to his previous experience, which was negative.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
curious, what do you...
Apologies if I offended any.
No, 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 no. No, the funny thing is that when you were talking about it, I have an example of a person who said exactly the same, really, like, dropping everything, not seeing the point of, not seeing how this road can evolve in academia, and then going to McDonald's. So it's funny.
In some fear.
Yeah, yeah. But I wonder, how do you see your role as the individual, or in general, the individual role of what we can do in academia, and what is the role of the system?
There we are very much tempted to give more responsibilities to ourselves than to the system. That's one problem, and I, of course, do that. So I see my responsibility a lot to buffer for the system, but that shouldn't be the case, and that's something where we should put the boundary. If we are getting unrealistic tasks, then they just cannot be completed. Of course, then we try to complete them, and that's very human. So this about setting some boundaries. That's of course one problem, and it's also gender colored, and different, yeah. Gender is, of course, a spectrum, but the stereotypical masculine paradigm, we know it's much easier to say no to stuff, and there are even some recent studies pointing out that male researchers avoid work within their groups and departments, while they do spend time working for something that gives them more visibility within the scientific community. They even employ strategies such as pretending that they are not good at something, or not responding to emails to appear unreliable so that somebody else gets this job. And then from this other gender stereotypical role, which is enforced by society, is that women need to be caring, that they need to fix everything, work everywhere. Again, these are just very rough stereotypizations. And then this invisible work often ends more on the plate of women. It can also happen that it ends on the plate of early career researchers who are not always in a position to say no to such tasks. So those are certain dangers. But if the system is just overloading everyone, then one has to say, like in a company, this is just too much. Our division cannot produce that, or cannot work on this level. Is just an unrealistic expectation. So those are some aspects of how I see this relationship between an individual and a system. So we like to be in control. That gives us a certain sense of power, and also predictability of the future, because we are fear things that are unknown, and it's all, again, very human. The other aspect is that we can only control ourselves, and we can influence the system in a way by communication with others, but bottom line, nobody can control the behavior of other people, can only control their own behavior. And that's something that one has to be aware of, but that also comes with the thought of, okay, but I'm not responsible for the behavior of the other person. And that's very hard. And it can happen on every level in science, that you get offended by people who are maybe above you, but also who are below you. And that is very challenging. But when this happens, then you have to say, this has nothing to do with me. This is this other person. That's not easy. And that requires a lot of self-understanding, and being able to manage yourself. And there is this compound effect. If such things repeat, it's becoming more and more toxic. And then it's again individual. For some people, is then very healthy to fight this situation. For some people, it's healthy to exit this situation, and for some people, just to move forward and not look at that, not to bother with it. And that also depends on the personality. It also depends on the ambitions and the goals of the individual. So that is definitely, yeah, what I see from the individual perspective. From the perspective of the community, I see what we mentioned, the explicit rules that can change, but also the implicit rules, this culture that needs to change.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like the implicit cultural rules take much more time.
Of course, also in the society.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if there would be one thing for the system that you would like to see a change, what would it be? For the academic system,
yeah. That is a very general question.
It is. So whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah, but I cannot give a general recommendation. It always has to be a tailor-made recommendation for the discipline or for the environment or for the country.
Mm-hmm. So let's take the environment where we are, the Netherlands, the technical university where we work. If that's not narrow enough, maybe specifically the department where you are at.
I'm noticing there a lot of positive developments, and that people are really aware of it, and that people are getting the permanent contracts early on, which is good. And I'm also noticing some positive motivation and stimulation and openness for dialogue. I am also noticing that people are working really a lot. What, for instance, could change is that the promotions shouldn't depend on obtaining grants, but also that is being discussed, and that is also hopefully will be more open. Then there is this discussion about the equality of researchers. So in the Netherlands, people are discussing that everyone should be called a professor, who is getting which title when they appear on TV, how they can refer to themselves. So there are a lot of these positive ideas that debunk the elitist myth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if I would look at it on a more global scale, I would definitely see this issue that we have this Scylla and Charybdis. On the one hand, we have this system in which no one is working much and everyone gets something, and people think that's ideal, but actually people are very demotivated and not a lot of good research is produced. Plus, the system is closed for new people and new ideas, and there is nepotism ruling. And that is one issue. And on the other hand, you have this other issue where everything is like hyper commercialized, and people need to produce a lot in order to justify their salaries. They need to bring external money in order to justify the existence of the university. And in this process, that all boils down on the PhD students, because in the first system is the question who gets the opportunity to do a PhD and whether this person will be stimulated enough to do some breakthrough result or to actually go abroad or to publish in an international journal, because that's all disincentivized, and whether there is even a possibility to coach that or to fund that if the system is not rich enough. And on the other hand, from this other perspective, then there is this potential abuse of PhD students, that they should just produce for their supervisors or for the project, and that even they themselves are ready to maybe do something that is academically dishonest or shady, just in order to get the numerical result, which is only being valued. So some balance between this reflectiveness and production has to be found. And I think this openness, for me, that's really important. The openness to diversity and both in the ideas, in the backgrounds, in different abilities. So really opening up academia for everyone, appreciating everyone in academia, that for me would be very, very important in the society in general, but also specifically in academia, because we have some specific knowledge and motives that only come from certain perspectives, and if we are diminishing them, right, like this colleague biologist from South America, and if we are just disregarding her ideas and desires of for research, then we end up in a serious problem, that the important topics won't be covered, and these topics can help the society.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm now thinking, because when you say important topics are not going to be covered, if we would also look through history, it's not that all the important topics were covered. Um, Quite on the contrary, it very much depended also on the political situation, or what the preferences are on different continents in different countries, where the government wants to put the money, because ultimately we are dealing with governmental money to do science.
Yes, and there were some results. A lot of science is being done in industry, but a lot of science is also being done in industry, which is funded with public funding. A lot of science was done based on the military research and military developments, which is ironic. But these ways exist. It's just that something was the case in the past doesn't mean that that's how it should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is the ideal scenario to which we want to strive for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I hope that our society has some type of a moral progress, that we are improving in our understanding, but also some type of progress in the knowledge and in approaching knowledge.
Yeah.
Of course, we have far more knowledge, but also in the ways of how we learn. So in the ways how we approach knowledge, and that we in philosophy say some epistemic approaches that is related. I mean, that term stands for learning and for knowledge and for managing how we learn on the group level. And there we of course have the idea that we cannot just explore every scientific idea, because we have limited resources and time. I'm not sure with now this AI expansion, I guess we can do more than before, but it can again mislead us in certain directions. So one has to be very careful where this is all going, and maybe also thinking in these futuristic scenarios of when scientists really need to use technology and have access to enormous technological power, whether they will try to cognitively or epistemically enhance themselves, and how is that race going to continue. But maybe it shouldn't be a race. Maybe there is some point in slowing down a little bit. Just a thought. I'm not saying this as a normative recommendation. It is just a thought that is being discussed in our department at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of slowing down. Yeah. But I wonder how that would be adopted by the wider community. Yeah, and I'm curious, for example, because you mentioned there are different topics that you are researching right now. I'm curious what is most exciting at this moment for you from all topics.
For me, it is very exciting to understand what the scientists will be doing once we can use so much of AI. And I am interested in seeing what are the limits of using AI for instance, scientific evaluation, for the review process, grant review process, but also the process of reviewing papers. And we know that a lot of people are using it in one way or another, irresponsibly, and then to try to train them to use it responsibly. And then the analogous problem happens also in the context of education, where people can again use these tools for grading, how that should all work. And that relates a little bit to this previous big topic of what is the human of the future, or a scientist of the future, able to do, and what will be expected of a scientist in the future to do with this technology, because it's very possible we will have to work more than what we work. That my colleague Lily Frank from my group was mentioning, that it did happen in the past that you have a technology which promises you that will do part of your work, but then you end up just having more tasks. So you do even more and use this technology, and there is some hyper productivity. So I am very interested, how can we responsibly learn using these tools, and have some nice work environment with them, and training people to be aware and to be sensitive of the biases in algorithms, of the problems of inexplainable algorithms, these transparency issues, where that can lead, how data is collected. The data is always interpreted in a certain way, and how can we empower people to use it to the best of their abilities, but to still maintain the critical aspect. And this is something in philosophy we call it a virtuous use, so a balanced use of technology.
I think I could ask you for another hour about this topic, but maybe we'll leave that for another episode. Is there something else that I didn't ask and that you wanted to touch upon?
I am now not sure, because we talked for a while. I think that we touched the main important components. For me, this elitist problem, the problem of having different stigmas, belonging to underprivileged groups in science. Being a PhD student is actually, there are more PhD students than PIs, but they are still underprivileged in the treatment. We talked about how to overcome that, and we were thinking about some potential challenges that the future is bringing to science. So I'm very happy with what we covered.
Great. Well, I'm happy that you accepted and you shared so selflessly everything that came to your mind about the different topics and things that you are dealing with or not dealing with. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for this opportunity. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.